I think you'll enjoy chapter 18 because it's quite a bit shorter and might be easier to understand. There is one challenging concept in this chapter, but overall it should be somewhat familiar. We will start with the anatomy and physiology of the kidneys and then talk about urine itself, the ureters, the urethra, and then the last word here, the micturition, just means the act of urination. The functions of the urinary system are to get rid of waste. So we want to get rid of that organic waste from your body fluids. We get it out through the urine, and it helps to create some homeostatic regulation within your body. So if you need more water, your body has the ability to hold on to that. If you need to get rid of water, you can excrete it. And you can do the same thing with salt molecules or urea and other things that we'll talk about as we get towards that part of the chapter. The kidney anatomy is kind of cool. It's a bean-shaped organ, and a lot of people say it's kidney bean shaped. Well, the kidneys were named because it looked like a bean. It's retroperitoneal, which means it's in the back. It's in the very, very back of your body. It's separated from the other organs through a nice layer of thin tissue. If you see the word renal, that means pertaining to kidneys. So renal fascia is that thin layer that's anchoring the kidney and the adrenal gland behind the other organs. It has a little fat pad that helps to cushion it, because I'm sure you've heard the term kidney punch, right? There's a punch to the back. We need to cushion that area because it's very vital and we can't have it damaged. And the last part here, the fibrous capsule, is one of the things that helps prevent infections of the urinary tract. So here's an overview. From the top, you can see that there is the kidney on the right, kidney on the left. You have the adrenal glands on top. We've talked about those with the endocrine system already. Then we have two ureters. I want you to pay attention to that word. There's two ureters. Then to the bladder and one urethra. A lot of students will confuse the words ureter and urethra. Remember that there's two ureters, one from each kidney, and one urethra that goes down from the bladder. So if we look from the top, you can see how the kidneys are in the back of your body, so they're almost next to your spine, and all the other organs are up here in this peritoneal cavity, so they're protected from that area. There are three distinct regions to the kidney: the cortex, medulla, and pelvis. Let's look at those on this picture. We have the cortex on the outside, this nice rimmed edge on the outside, the medulla, which takes up these little triangle pieces, and then the pelvis is the part that drains out into the ureter that will eventually go to the bladder. It's important for the kidney to have this blood supply because that's how we filter some of the blood. We're going to be able to take some nutrients out and put some back in to the bloodstream and filter it out into the urine. And from this picture, you can see how how vascularized this kidney is. Tons and tons of little blood vessels that are going out into the cortex of the kidney to help filter that blood to create urine from the waste. All right, if there's any slide that's important for this chapter, it's this one and the next one. The nephron is so important to the kidneys. The nephron is the structural and functional unit of the kidney. Gotta know that. It consists of different parts, and we'll walk through these in the next slide. And it's also responsible for doing three things: filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. Let's look at the next slide to talk about these things. So, you have tons and tons and tons of these inside your kidneys, and they're all right at that edge where the cortex meets the medulla. The first thing that will happen, the blood stream is going to enter into one of these renal corpuscles, right? This is where the first step is happening, the filtration. It's called glomerular filtration because it's inside this glomerulus. The blood is going to get rid of its waste right here. We're going to take that waste through this tube, which is called the proximal convoluted tubule. Remember, proximal just means closest, convoluted means kind of twisty, and tubule just means tube. So you can take those three words and make it into an easier term. It's a close, twisted tube. From there, we're going to go down into the loop of Henle, which comes right back up into the distal convoluted tubule. Remember, distal means far, so it's the farthest twisted tube. And the last step is to drain into this collecting duct, which will eventually get to one of the ureters. All right, so we've got the direction of flow. Now let's talk about what's happening in each one. And I would encourage you to check out the image on page 605 in your book to compare this image to. During the fluids flow through these tubes, you are absorbing and secreting certain things. So in some places, I'm going to skip to the next slide. If you are reabsorbing a nutrient, let's just say it's sodium. If you are reabsorbing sodium, it's coming out of the tube into your body. So your body is reabsorbing it. If you are secreting something, or secreting a sodium ion, it's going from your body into your tube, right? These two words can be kind of hard to understand if you're thinking about it backwards. But think about it from the perspective of your body. If you're reabsorbing, it's coming out of the tube. If you're secreting, you're putting it into the tube so you can excrete it away. All right, here's my challenge to you. If you can draw a nephron and label all of the parts that were discussed here, you'll be in good shape for this chapter. If you draw those parts and then summarize what each one of them does, if it's reabsorbing or secreting or filtering, you will be so much better off when you try to take the final exam, because this is a very important part of this chapter. I encourage you to use page 607 and then also the big drawing on 616 to 617. That will help immensely. So diving into this a little bit further, a little more detail. The first step when you're looking at a nephron is the glomerular filtration. It's a passive process, so we don't need energy for it. And the pressures that are coming from the outside are pushing the fluids into the membrane. We measure that as a GFR. If you're in a facility or clinic that measures GFRs or has anything to do with kidney function, you'll hear that term a lot. And it's really just measuring the volume of filtrate or fluid that's being filtered every minute. The second step is tubular reabsorption. So remember, if you're reabsorbing, that means it's coming back into the body. So the filtrate is entering the proximal convoluted tubule. Nutrients, water, and ions are reabsorbed because your body wants to hang on to that good stuff. And the rest of the filtrate is passed on through. The third step is tubular secretion. So maybe we have extra things we want to get rid of, like excess potassium, or maybe leftover remnants of a medication you were taking. That's going to be secreted into the tube so it can leave your body through your urine. All right, a couple things have control on how much of certain items you want to keep. So how much water do you want to keep? How much sodium do you want to keep in your body, and so forth. 3 hormones that have control over that are ADH, antidiuretic hormone, aldosterone, and ANP, or atrial natriuretic peptide. Make sure, if those don't sound familiar, review those from your endocrine chapter before you move on. Alright, so urine should be clear and pale yellow. Anything else would mean that you're dehydrated or have some kind of kidney dysfunction. It should be slightly aromatic. if there's an ammonia odor, that means that it's probably just been allowed to stand too long in the external environment. It should be slightly acidic, has a higher specific gravity than water. That means that's more dense. And hopefully, if you are properly hydrated, your urine should be between 93 and 97% water. Okay, so we talked a lot about the kidneys. Let's talk about the rest of the tract. So from the kidneys, we send that fluid into the ureters. The ureters are going to be just a passageway that go down to the bladder, and they enter into the bladder right down here. The bladder is a muscular sac, so it can expand, and I'm sure a lot of us have felt that before. If you can't go to the bathroom and you've had too much water, you feel that expanse, and it's kind of amazing how much fluid your bladder can actually hold. There are 3 layers of tissue. The middle one is the muscle that's allowing that expansion, and on the inside there's a mucosa layer, just like many other organs, that helps to create a safe environment. Lastly, the urethra. Now this is what's going to vary between the sexes. Both males and females have one urethra. It's a muscular tube that drains urine to the outside of your body. There's 2 sphincter muscles. That's what helps you to control your bladder. One of them is voluntary and one is involuntary. The external urethra is either between the clitoris and vagina in females or at the tip of the penis in females. So let's look at that. Here is the penis down here. Look at the length of this urethra. It's actually pretty long. It goes right underneath the prostate, which can explain some problems going to the bathroom or urinating when you have prostate enlargement. And then you have the bladder that's above. Let's compare this to the female system. Here's the bladder again, very similarly shaped. But look at the difference in length between the urethra. So we're talking a very, very short distance compared to the males. And that's why it's so much more common for females to have urinary tract infections, because for bacteria to get up into this bladder, it has such a short distance to travel. Whereas compared to the males, if you were to have bacteria enter the tip of the penis, it would have to go all the way through this entire urethra to reach the bladder. So it's just much more common for females to have to deal with a urinary tract infection. All right, lastly, micturition. Micturition is the act of urinating. Distension of the bladder activates your need to go. So when your bladder is getting more full, that activates the stretch receptors, triggers your reflexes, and helps you store the urine until you have the voluntary initiation to relax those sphincters and let the fluid flow. So voluntary control depends on your nervous system. Usually you can't depend on a full development or full control over the bladder until about 4 years of age. And then as you age, the kidney function is going to decline, the nephrons are going to shrink, and the bladder loses its tone, which also contributes to some incontinence in older adults. If you have any questions about Chapter 15, let me know. I know the nephron can be pretty confusing, so if that is causing you any problems, I'd be more than happy to explain it one-on-one. Just let me know. Thanks.